Toyota built a 4,200-pound crossover and gave it the bones of a Lexus-adjacent luxury product. They filled the doors with acoustic insulation and priced this one around $52,000 as tested. Somewhere, a Lexus salesperson just tightened their quarter zip. Whether this is a success or otherwise comes down to whether this drives like the Lexus it almost is, or like a front-drive biased hybrid crossover wearing a crown. Zero to 60 in 7.1 seconds is reasonable crossover territory, but it's not the kind of number somebody prints on a hoodie. The really useful part of the acceleration happens in the first 30 feet when both electric motors and the gasoline motor are engaged. And maybe that's a bit of this Crown Signia's magic, because around town, which is where you're going to drive this thing, it feels much quicker than that 0 to 60 of 7.1 seconds. Ask for maximum acceleration and the entire attitude of the powertrain changes. The 2.5-liter four-cylinder gets to work immediately, stays at a single engine speed, and then the eCVT sort of lets the road speed catch up. Efficient and effective? Yes. Elegant? No. Because in a cabin as quiet as this, that engine note is a little harder to ignore. And yes, the eCVT is a very sophisticated thing. Yes, I know how it works. No, we are not having that discussion here. There's no delay whatsoever because it doesn't have to shift gears, and there's no hunting on a grade either. It's just a very smooth, seamless transmission. But the trade-off is with some mechanical rhythm, because a geared transmission gives acceleration a pause. This just gives you continuous thrust and one long audible mechanical vowel. You can't fault the engineering, but if you're looking for theater, you're going to have to look somewhere else. As you know, this is all-wheel drive, but there is no drive shaft that runs to the rear. At the rear, those two wheels are powered by an electric motor, and it delivers 89 pounds of torque. And for the most part, that's enough torque to mask the front drive architecture of this platform. And if we're just looking at the numbers, I think the spec sheet undersells what's really going on here. The last time I drove one of these, it was during the winter, and it was a major snowstorm. And in that deep, heavy snow, this had incredible traction. It was very sure-footed. And I think in winter, that's where this platform and the powertrain architecture earns its money. There is an EV mode, and you can drive this purely on electric, but it covers the distance between about 2 stop signs in a residential neighborhood. Toyota calls it EV mode anyway. Subscribers get notified when new episodes drop on this channel. Everyone else leaves it to the algorithm. And if you want to get notified about our new episodes, well, that's what the subscribe button does. Unexpectedly, steering's a highlight here, not in terms of feel, of course, but in terms of precision. On center, it's nice and strong, and as soon as you turn in, it's responsive. It allows you to track a line through a corner perfectly from start to end. There's much more assist in the entire steering system than I would like, but it still allows you to carve a proper line. The steering tells you where the front tires are going, but it doesn't feel particularly interested in tell you what they're doing when they get there. Brakes are overachievers here, and I think that has to do with the fact that Toyota has spent a couple of decades working on blending regenerative braking with actual braking when the brake pads clamp the rotors. You don't feel any kind of handoff when you're driving. You certainly don't feel it through the brake pedal, and this brake pedal is absolutely dialed. You have all the confidence in the world, not only to place this on corner entry, but also under emergency braking. Sure, you do feel the mass under braking, but when you do need to get this stopped, it stops confidently. The best part is you've got precise control, feel, and modulation with this brake pedal. I don't know how Toyota does it. We do have to talk about the dampers, because this Crown Signia gets some special dampers. And if we're looking at this relative to a Lexus RX, this is much less sporting. The suspension is definitely calibrated for comfort over sporting intent. When you hit moderate to large road imperfections, there's just a little bit more body movement than I would like, and it takes just a heartbeat for the chassis to settle after one of those big bumps. Body roll is reasonably well controlled as well, and I think when you're behind the wheel of a Crown Signia, you know exactly what you're driving, and this is definitely not an F-Sport RX. On the other hand, I think the dynamic characteristics are what make this Crown Signia special, because the busyness with a sport-tuned suspension is completely absent here, and that makes this feel very expensive. If you'd like to support the channel beyond just watching, the merch store link is here, and your support there means more time for us to produce episodes like this, less time worrying about industry access. No pressure, just an option. The hip point is about 26 inches. Kind of meaningless on its own, but in context of crossovers, it's kind of a middle point. It's not as low as a sedan, and it's not as tall as a common crossover. And here on the highway, you're seated high enough that you can see over most cars, which is exactly why people buy crossovers. The fundamental seating position's excellent, lots of adjustment in the seat and the steering column. Perfect shape to the steering wheel as well. It's just right on point for this car. Encourages you to have your hands at 9 and 3. And the seat's sculpted more for your comfort than cornering support. It's really not that interested in holding you in place in a corner, but it is very interested in making sure you're comfortable when you're traveling long distances. Toyota has retained actual buttons for climate controls in a car in 2026. The controls aren't hidden in a special zone at the bottom of the screen. They are actual buttons. Love the shifter, and this style of shifter I think was pioneered on the Lexus LC, which is a lovely car, but I'm glad it's here because it just works. It's very simple, straightforward. It is electronic, but I think that speaks to all of the ergonomics in this cabin. They're all very straightforward. There's not an excessive amount of controls that are built into the screen. Here in the driver's seat is where the experience feels very Lexus. It's very quiet in here. It's very comfortable in here. But also, all of the materials wouldn't look out of place in any Lexus. Build quality is top-notch. This feels extremely well screwed together. Part of it has to do with the fact that the cabin is quiet, and that part of the driving experience is being reinforced. But when you close the doors, touch any materials, deal with the hatch, whatever the case is, this feels as well built as anything coming from Lexus. Plus, it's very spacious in here, both in this front row and the second row. Clever use of storage. There's a partition here in the cup holder area that you can use for all sorts of things. Plenty of headroom both in the front row and the second row, and in terms of cargo carrying capacity, there is an enormous amount of space underneath the hatch. I can't even fill it with even double my usual everyday carry. And yes, those second row seats split and fold, so you've got a lot of versatility in terms of carrying larger items. Plus, this will tow up to 2,700 pounds. And overall, I think the packaging here is not the kind that wants to impress you once. It wants to annoy you less every day. And if you want to live with a crossover like this, none of the things you deal with on a day-to-day basis are going to get in your way. There's a fixed panoramic glass moonroof here, and it doesn't move. The shade does. I think Toyota calls it the panoramic glass roof because permanent skylight tested poorly in focus groups. One helpful feature, I always love these, the camera mirror, and they work wonderfully because they do present you with a wider field of view than a traditional mirror would. And the only downside is perhaps for the first week, your eyes are going to take a little bit of time to get adjusted. Other crossovers come in bronze or mocha. The Crown Signia comes in Bronze Age. And I guess when the name is Crown, the name of the paint has to keep up. The like button tells YouTube to share this episode with other people like you interested in an episode like this. And if this episode gave you more information than a brochure or a press release, that's the entire ask. Takes just a second. That's what this Crown Signia told me after a week behind the wheel, but press cars leave before small irritations become patterns. Owners on the forums and subreddits have had enough time with the Crown Signia to find the kind of problems that never make it into a first drive video. The spare tire issue is one that irritates a lot of owners. The underfloor cargo well looks like it should hold a spare, then misses by about an inch. Both US and Canadian cars get a tire repair kit instead, which works beautifully on the kind of puncture that's read the owner's manual and agreed to cooperate. Multiple sources flag the heated and ventilated seat buttons as broken. The buttons are doing exactly what Toyota's engineers asked them to do. The system auto switches between heating and ventilation based on what the climate control is set to. Owners hit a button, the seat does the opposite of what they expected, and the conclusion is malfunction rather than feature. It's striking how many people have reached that conclusion. Toyota could have prevented it with 2 sentences in the owner's manual and apparently chose not to, but maybe that's realistic because people aren't going to read it anyway. Get this, the Limited has synthesized engine sound that's piped through the JBL system under hard throttle. This is Toyota adding noise to a car they spent considerable effort making quiet. Owners report using a $40 OBD2 dongle to disable it, partly because some dealers don't seem to know it exists. Once it's off, the cabin gets quieter, and removing the fake noise is a strange outcome. Then there are the door gaskets. In winter, slush accumulates along the inside lower edge and waits there for your pant leg. Owners have brought it up with dealers have acknowledged it. The fix appears to be spiritual growth or darker pants. But here's the thing. Owners may complain about their Crown Signias, but they still rate it very highly. Aggregated owner scores sit around 4.6 out of 5, and the same forums documenting the missing spare, fake sound, and slush issue are full of people calling the Crown Signia one of the best vehicles they've owned. And that, my friends, tells you more than a press launch or a week-long press loan. If you own one of these or have some quality seat time in one of these, let me know in the comments what I got right and what I got wrong, because real-world owner experiences are much more valuable than a week-long press loan, and I always read those comments. The ECVT and the front drive-based architecture aren't flaws in the Crown Signia as much as they are the ceiling. Open the throttle and power arrives more ordinary than the cabin around it deserves, which also tells you which Toyota platform you're sitting on. Drive it the way 95% of buyers will, and that powertrain fades into the background behind the acoustic glass and the suppressed road noise that the engineers got the budget for. The front drive bias is genuine, but only when you're really pushing this car. But when it needs to, that rear electric motor steps in and helps settle the chassis. This drives like the Lexus it almost is, right up to the threshold that most RX buyers never reach. The Crown Signia is for the buyer who lives below that threshold, which is most of them. This is the closest $52,000 Toyota that has ever come close to making a Lexus salesperson sweat through their quarter zip. It's for the buyer who wants quiet, comfort, fuel economy, and useful space, but doesn't need the dealership experience to involve espresso and a prettier invoice. This is for the people who ask what the Lexus money buys after the test drive, not before it. Badge buyers will still buy the badge. Toyota built this for everyone else. Not every Lexus buyer is going to walk across the showroom and look at the Toyotas. The ones who do will find this Crown Signia, a car that's worse at ceremony and better at making ceremony look like an upcharge. That's the Crown Signia. Subscribe if you want to see more of these. Don't if you don't. Comments are open if you disagree. And if you want to help support more of these, the link to the merch store is here. See you on the next one.